Minecraft is the game that pioneered the model of free, continuous updates. Each of these updates adds new things to the game while changing existing things and fixing broken things. And over the 15 years the game has been around, they've released 21 major game updates which do each of these three things, to different extents of course, but there are also, over the time of the 15 years of Minecraft, a large number of more minor updates that have come out. These usually focus on smaller changes, although sometimes these can be quite big, as well as bug fixes, because these are an important part of Minecraft staying stable. However, over the last few years, they've started to add more features to these more minor updates, even recently renaming them to drops to reflect the fact that they want to add much more via them. This is a great strategy, and it means that Minecraft represents a balance between these three things a bit better now in the minor updates, because adding features to the game is important. I mean, without new content to explore and discover, what is the point of getting back into the game? What is the point of looking around your world more if you already know everything that's going to be in there? And indeed, I think that it's also worth mentioning, changing is really important too. Lots of features just don't quite fit into the gameplay without the player feedback which can shape them, and even just the passage of time can lead to old features and new features not quite fitting into Minecraft together without some active change. And indeed, bug fixes. Despite the fact that no one likes a bug fix update, it's a lot more boring than anything else, it has to be said that without bug fixes, the game wouldn't work as intended. It wouldn't be playable in some places, and there are lots of bugs that definitely need fixing, which is why having each of these three pillars be equally represented is important in a Minecraft update. However, they've recently moved away from one of these pillars towards another, and that is indeed away from changing features in the game towards adding them, and this means that we have a clear situation where Mojang seems to be afraid of change. And so what is the deal with that? Why is Minecraft so afraid of change? Let's discuss it today. Between 2018 and 2021, Minecraft experienced a golden era of updates, a relatively brief but transformative period in its history. These updates didn't just introduce new features, which are loved to this day, they also redefined core aspects of the game itself, elevating the Minecraft experience. If we take a look at the 6 updates that released in this 4-year time span, you can see that pretty much every one of these was loved when it came out, and is considered to be one of the best even to this day, with the only real exception being Buzzy Bees, a smaller update which released with its titular mob, as well as a brand new mechanic in the form of honey. It was a very small update which really just added a few things to the game, and although none of those things are hated, some of them even quite cute, it's rare that they are considered to be some of the best features, and indeed it's rare this is considered to be one of the best updates, and so it stands alone separate to all of the other updates which have a much more positive community sentiment. And indeed, each of those updates took a major mechanic and changed it, while this one simply added a few things on the top. And so what do you think Minecraft did following this golden era of updates? Did they continue their very popular plans to fix major parts of the game, or did they take the less liked and less popular path forwards of making more Buzzy Bee style updates? Well, that is certainly some foreshadowing that brings us into the update that ended the era, 1.19. The Wild update was the first in a new era of Minecraft, it is generally accepted, and in this they added the Swamp Biome vote. Biome votes were a logical extension to the mob votes, where instead of voting on a single mob to be added to Minecraft, instead you would vote on a biome to be updated. Minecraft knew that lots of biomes could do with an update, and that's why we saw 6 different alternatives put forwards, and the only 2 that ever made it into the game by being voted on were Taiga and Mountains as part of the Village and Pillage and Caves and Cliffs update respectively. However, Mojang did decide to add the Swamp Biome vote despite it losing anyway, and they decided to update the swamp with all of the features that they promised, except here's what the swamp looked like before 1.19, and here's what the swamp looked like afterwards. Oh, that's the same image. My bad, I think it's meant to have mangrove trees in there now, except no, instead of adding the mangrove trees to the swamp and updating the biome in this way, instead an entirely new biome was created, the mangrove swamp biome. As a result, the old swamp stays exactly the same, still being made out of oak trees that just have vines on them, and this results in a huge gap in quality between the old biome and the new one. They could have had this be a biome that generated much more frequently in people's worlds, but instead they decided to keep the old swamp in there, which is great if you're Shrek and you think the swamp is perfect the way it is and you just want people to stay out of it because they're ruining it with their changes. But for everyone who isn't addicted to nostalgia, looking for the new mangrove swamp and finding this certainly is disappointing. This update also added the Deep Dark as a new cave biome addition, and it's worth mentioning that this is arguably just a completion of changing the caves, which they did last update. You wouldn't want to rechange them literally 6 months later. And also it's worth mentioning that they were going to add fireflies as a brand new mob, but instead decided to have frogs eat an existing mob. This is actually a great great example of not adding something new for the sake of it and instead changing something that already exists. However, people were attached to their 2 pixels, and so this is one of the biggest backlashes of the update, following up with the birch forest, which is very much the same and would have been a similar improvement and revamp of a biome. So it's very telling that one of the big things they decided to cancel was a change to existing features so that they could instead work on creating new ones. We can see that decision follow forward in the Tales and Trails update because they could have improved signs substantially by making them possible to hang from villages, but instead we got a brand new type with the hanging sign. Instead of adding boats for all the wood types, they simply added rafts just for the bamboo wood. Again, there's a whole raft of complaints that I could raise with this, but I'll just say it's weird that there's one boat that is the odd one out rather than lots of unique boats. Also, it's worth mentioning the Cherry Grove is a brand new biome. The calibrated skulk sensor is just an objective improvement over the skulk sensor, and so is really a brand new version of that. And I think that the only real counterpoints in this update would be the fact that every structure received an update with the armor trims, and some even received some archaeology on top of that, with the desert wells and desert pyramids now having some suspicious sand, and indeed the ocean ruins having the archaeology and the fun mob that you can find below that. But in general, this was also an update that was about adding rather than improving. They made a big point of talking about how they were going to improve mechanics, but they still decided to do so by adding entirely new blocks, and this is something you can see most clearly with the bookshelf. It literally already existed in the game. There is a bookshelf item, but they decided to add a brand new one that functioned as a bookshelf. You could have easily made the regular bookshelf work this way, but maybe some people were addicted to their old textures, and so instead we have 2 bookshelves in Minecraft rather than 1. They could have improved, but instead they decided to add. The trend continued in 1.20.80, or the armored paws drop, because it added wolf armor, which was very cute, and was repaired using a armadillo scute. This is weird because we already had it a scute in the game, and the specific purpose of it was to make super defense potions and a piece of armor, but instead we got it a second type of scute, which was gotten in a much easier way than the first one. But why didn't we just improve the way of getting that first type? Indeed, look at 1.21, or the tricky trials, and you can see how it was designed as an upgrade to the monster room or dungeons, but really it can't be considered that because it's a brand new structure that is hundreds of times larger and which of course exists alongside the old dungeon. This also has the vault as a main feature of it, and this was added to solve the problem of loot on a multiplayer server. However, despite it being a much smarter way to do loot than loot chests, they only added it to this new structure and didn't retrospectively add it anywhere in the past, even in places where it would be really useful, such as the Elytra with end cities. And indeed, the Garden Awakens is the final and biggest example of taking this to its extreme, because instead of updating the Dark Forest and making it live up to its former name, instead they decided to add a brand new biome, which was a variation of the Dark Forest, literally to the point where it uses the same tree generation, but everything inside of this drop therefore is a brand new addition. There is literally nothing that you can claim is an existing feature that's been changed, besides some small tweaks and bug fixes here or there, and so this is both the most recent and grandest example of how Mojang are trying to add to the game much more than they're trying to change. They have moved away from the updating major parts of the game phase, and they've moved into one where they simply add things, which seems like it could be a logical move. I mean, after all, maybe they've updated everything that needs it, and there's nothing left that needs to change, except... Yes, Mojang does keep adding new features, but there are many existing features which are in need of a change. This is excluding the whole bug fixing side of every update, which does still happen on a schedule. You could argue it could be a more frequent thing, but there are also many major gameplay mechanics which don't just need a bug fixed here or there, they need an entire redoing. The biggest example of this is combat, because no matter what you think about combat, even if you're one of those people who thinks Bedrock combat is better because it doesn't have any of the recharges or new things from 1.9, it's crazy there's such a big difference between the two systems, and even if you like the Bedrock combat system, having no offhand use kind of sucks. That's something they need to fix. Shields are still only half usable on Bedrock, so you have to crouch to use them instead of just being able to use them. Also, Java still has this attack cooldown, which causes many people to dislike the game, and which many servers have to actively turn off, so you get kind of this weird splittering of not just Bedrock versus Java, but also Java single player versus servers, and also there are all sorts of other missing features on the Bedrock Bedrock version of the game that came out in that update 10 years ago. Spectral arrows and the glowing effect, the improved mob AI, the nerfs to attack damage, and the faster health regeneration from saturation. It is ludicrous to me how slow it is to heal on Bedrock. There is no faster way to speed it up outside of potions, and so you just have to sit there, especially if you're going from empty to full, and you can go AFK for a bit. Maybe if you eat a long enough dinner, you'll come back in time for a full health bar, or what you can do is you can kill yourself, you can run back to your dead body, organize your inventory, name a few extra items, and you'll still have that done faster than the regen process. It is ridiculous to me, but if you like that system more than Java, well then okay, Java needs changing too. The shields don't bounce mobs off correctly, and there's all sorts of fun changes that they should be doing to make the two systems in parity at a minimum, but even beyond that, they could obviously improve it much better than just bringing the two systems together. Similarly, enchanting has many problems, the biggest being anvils. Anvils will eventually reach a too expensive limit, which means you either have to make a brand new tool, disenchant your existing tool, or have to use mending to continue to repair it. This was a defendable system before mending, because at least you could argue it forced you to have multiple tools, but now it means everyone wants mending and there's no point having a tool without it, and this moves into the second problem because the enchanting table is very random with its enchantments, and so what do people do instead if they specifically want one? Well, they use villagers to roll for specific enchantments and then mass buy them. Why randomly spend all of your levels, which take a long time to get, and some lapis at this place when you can just go to this place and give this man some money and he'll always give you the exact same book? We have basically desire pathed our way into a much more boring enchantment system, and this is something that Minecraft easily could fix. In the same way that trading itself was broken and kind of boring as a system, so they revamped it and made it more fun, enchanting has been made more boring by the addition of trading, which is why they could probably come in here and fix that too. Also, enchantments provide a huge balance enchantment, with many enchantments just being considered OP, such as mending, which has no real competitor or reason to use anything else. Even on bows, where infinity and mending, the two best enchantments, are mutually incompatible, there's still only a funny debate on the internet where people laugh and go haha about which one you want, because that's how silly it is to say that you'd put anything on your tool instead of mending. This is a problem and something they need to fix. A pretty fundamental mechanic too. The slanty enchanty update is what I'll be calling that, unless there's any problems with that name, and I guess they'd also have to work out how to make something go diagonal. Give us diagonal blocks at the same time. But the point is, enchanting is a system which clearly could do with some overhauling. Just like the existing biomes as a whole, I would say that they are largely quite dull. There are very few structures in the game right now. Not every biome has a structure that is unique to it, and this is a shame in my opinion, because yeah, when you get into, say, a birch forest, you're just kind of in a birch forest until you find another biome. You have all the value you need from the biome, from the first tree you find, and the rest of it is just a slog. Whereas when I'm going through a jungle, I know there's a small chance of finding a jungle temple, which keeps the place fresh and alive. In fact, one of my favorite biomes is the desert, because it has 3 structures, temple, well, and village, and that is enough to make me really want to explore every desert I come through. Even if the structures are rare, like the Woodland Mansion, it's enough for you to have some hope, and that hope really adds to the exploration. And so yeah, they've made many promises about other biome vote options that they're going to be implementing, but I'm holding my breath because it's been quite a few years, but the Savannah, Desert, and Badlands could all do an update. I personally think the Desert is great. I think the Savannah is like a 9 out of 10 already, but the Badlands update certainly could add a structure and some other unique characteristics to the place, because terracotta was wonderful when it was the only color block, but now everyone wants to use concrete anyway. This is honestly a sign of how sometimes Minecraft adds things that make old things obsolete, and then those old things kind of sit there for a little bit longer. But I think the best example of that might be the End, which is so bare right now. It has just the Ender Dragon and the End Cities, which are incredible in their own right. The Ender Dragon is so useful because she can be used to make Dragon's Breath. I mean, you can make lingering potions with that, which I do all the time. Basically, every potion is better as a lingering potion, so I need so much Dragon's Breath, and it's great to, does anyone buy what I'm saying right there? You get the point. The Dragon's Breath thing is a little bit underwhelming. Lingering potions are a cool idea, but even in PvP, they're really quite niche compared to splash potions. They're just not that useful as a concept, ultimately. And also, if you look at the rest of the End, you can see, the End Islands are pretty bland. There's no real exploration you do here. You find the one structure that exists, and then you explore a little bit longer, and you find that one structure that exists again. There are 2 great reasons to be here, though, outside of the incredible loot, which you often don't need by this point in the game. Although I recently came here at day 9 in hardcore, hardcore, incredible experience, but I digress. Anyway, if you come here, most of the time by the time you defeat the dragon, what you really want is an elytra and shulker boxes. These are 2 reasons to go looking, except once you have an elytra, you put mending on it, and so you don't really need another one. Maybe a second is great, but also once you go around this place and get 2 shulkers, they can reproduce now, meaning you get infinite shulker boxes for the price of 2. 1 end city is enough for you, but we have an entire dimension which exists solely to repopulate it with these. This is a problem and one Mojang could easily fix, and so that's why I'm gonna go on record right now and say it. I think that Minecraft should come up with an end update. Wow, what a unique idea I've had. I should be serious here and say it's one of the most requested ideas the community has had ever, and it's so popular, even Mojang has said they need to do it. Whenever they talk about a 4th dimension, they say, yeah, the existing dimensions really could do with some work first, and ultimately the end is a dimension which has been lacking in work since, gonna check my notes right here. Oh, the start of the presidential term that was 3 presidents ago. That's right, Donald Trump the original, not the sequel, and that is crazy to me that long a period of time, so much can happen, and the end sits exactly how it is. And so that is why they need to have an end update, something I imagine would have been on Mojang's priority list if they remained with keeping things fresh and updating them, but sadly, which has fallen by the wayside in the wake of the move towards updates which add instead of change. The move itself is pretty weird, I mean, especially now that we have the reception of all of these years of updates where they're adding instead of changing, but what makes it even weirder in my opinion is it's not like Mojang ran out of passion for updating the existing game. Instead, they've actually been putting large amounts of work into it, it's just they haven't released any of it. And if that sounds far-fetched, let me show you all of the pending changes that Minecraft are looking to make to the game. Minecraft has been substantially revamping the game for a while now, but they've made these all in snapshots that have not been made available to the wider public and which haven't been released as part of a wider update, despite the fact that it's been almost 5 years of development, and the biggest and most obvious example of that is the combat test snapshots. This was when Jeb decided, he's taking a step back from developing new features by themselves to instead rebalance major parts of the game, including combat, which he did via 8 separate snapshots. These aren't available in the launcher, they were made available via Reddit, funnily enough, and there are 8 separate versions of these, and then the 8th version has multiple sub-variants, meaning there are actually more than 10 separate snapshots you can find, and these balance major parts of the game, such as shields, which by the way, can be activated via crouching. As you can see, I'm crouching to activate my shield rather than pressing right click, but also the shield itself has been nerfed, so that instead of blocking 100% of damage, it actually blocks the first 5 hearts of damage, making it a bit more balanced. Also, your hunger can heal you when you're at 6.5 saturation bars, or in fact all the way down to 0, because why shouldn't it right now? Right now you need a full hunger bar. After this, you wouldn't necessarily, and also if you do go up to full, you'll be able to heal not at current Java rates, where it's basically a health potion, but instead at the kind of double the speed of Bedrock, a nice balance between the two systems. Also, drinking is faster than eating to encourage potions over just a single piece of steak like on Java, but still to actually have a decent balance between that. And more interesting than any of those things to me is the fact that bows get less accurate when you draw them further. If you hold down a bow, as you can see, it's pretty accurate, and then the longer we hold it down, the more it kind of sways around. This isn't necessarily a PvP change, but it is a change encouraged to make people, take more shots of bows and use it as a rapid fire weapon. And in other words, basically, Jeb wants you to quick scope, but in Minecraft, and I think that's very hilarious. And similarly with ranged weapons, snowballs stack to 16 in Minecraft. Why is that true? These arrows can stack to 64, stake and dark oak stairs can stack to 64. How can I hold 64 of these in one slot of my inventory, but only 16 snowballs? They literally compact together. Anyway, the point is after this snapshot, you can take up to 64 in one stack, like you logically probably should have been able to forever. There are all sorts of other changes, such as the combat delay. Now, instead of punishing you if you try to spam click, you get the regular damage when you spam click, just like this, or you can charge up and that bar still exists, and when it recovers, you get an extra boost of damage. Similarly, the sweeping edge is now fully an enchantment. Also, there's a brand new enchantment called chopping, which you can use to actually, if you have chopping on your axe, you'll be able to go through shields better, and there's a whole bunch of other combat rebalances that are all pretty darn good. However, what happened to these? Well, sadly, if you actually press the button, they say, here's how you provide feedback, and you click this, and it takes you to aka.ms/Java Combat Snap, which is a place that no longer exists. It's a part of the feedback website you can't leave feedback on anymore, and the last we ever heard from Jeb, despite the fact that he was so enthusiastic and testing this so much in 2020 is midway through 2020. I wonder what happened that year. He said that he was done with phase 1 of the testing, so he likes this version, but now he's working on phase 2, which is balancing the rest of the game and the mobs and everything else in there, and that balancing seemingly hasn't been completing. We actually haven't seen any of the starting of it. Maybe it's happening behind the scenes right now and we're just about to see a brand new combat update, but after 4 years and every year assuming, yeah, right now he must mean that he's finished with it, right? It starts to look as though the features have been developed and then have sat there unusable in the base game, despite the fact that I like this system so much better than the current Bedrock system and a little bit better than the current Java system, which is probably a good thing, but apparently not a good enough thing. Oh, by the way, one of my favorite other things is if you use the Impaling enchantment on a trident, it will deal damage to all enemies a lot more, as long as it's raining, just like it does on Bedrock. I thought this was a bug, but if Jeb is taking it and putting it on Java, apparently he likes this feature too, which I just think is cool. Speaking of cool, let's show you the other changes they've made. You can actually experiment with any of the other 3 sets of changes on the Java edition, where Experiments is a brand new setting, and in there you can see minecart improvements, redstone experiments, and indeed the villager trade rebalance. That is what we're going to talk about first, because it is definitely the most contentious of the 3 sections. And the reason why is that people are very attached to their villagers of this type. That is to say, nothing about his skin color or his outfit, but instead the fact that he is a librarian. Librarian villagers are the best way to trade for basically any book, because like we mentioned before, enchanting is hard, whereas trading is very, very easy and repeatable. And so right now, the outfit that he's wearing is important. I wasn't making a racism allegory, although maybe if you want you can make one for yourself, because right now no matter what clothes a villager wears, no matter what skin color he has, he's the same villager underneath it all. However, after this update, if you have a villager born in a snow biome, he will have a different set of trades to one born in a plains. This is actually great because it increases the amount that you'd have to go to different villages rather than having one trading hall, but there's the rub. Instead of having a trading hall, you'd have to go to different villages because this guy would only be able to offer, if I'm not mistaken, fortune free, whereas the plains guy would only be able to offer protection free. If you wanted to get mending or unbreaking or silk touch or any of these other incredibly valuable enchantments, you would have to go to different places. Specifically, you'd have to then go to a jungle for unbreaking or a swamp for mending. These are the 2 most valuable enchantments and they wouldn't spawn naturally anymore. If you're not familiar, we can type /locate structure and then village, and you'll see the different types of village that exist. There is no such thing as a jungle or a swamp village. So although you can naturally find jungle or swamp villages, it's very, very, very unlikely. This means what you'd actually have to do is bring 2 villagers here, convince them to breed, then set up a trading station, and then you would be able to get unbreaking, and then you'd have to do the same again in a swamp to get mending. People thought that this was disastrous, and there was a huge backlash against it, but they also made changes to the armorer that was substantially less controversial, in my opinion. They also made changes, this is not the armorer, this is the weaponsmith, but they also made changes to the armorer, which was substantially less controversial. They also made changes to how structures generate, and they also made great changes to the Wandering Trader. In fact, these great changes are what I would rely on if I was ever going to do a hardcore flat run that we vaguely mentioned before, because the Wandering Trader would be able to buy things as well as sell things, and also, if you wanted to get particular loot, you wouldn't have to rely on a villager, because if you wanted mending, you could go to this structure. If you want unbreaking, you go to this structure, and that was a really great set of changes, but instead of implementing them, they've stayed in the experimental tab for a while, maybe waiting for a Village and Pillage Part 2, maybe scrapped. There's not been official communication on what. Oh yeah, I guess at this point we could mention experimental redstone changes. Honestly, really great to anyone who isn't that deep into redstone. People who are into redstone say, I think it'd be better if you don't mess with our systems. But basically, trying to remove randomness from redstone is a really great thing for newcomers, but people who have played around with redstone forever love that it's non-random because you can, if you learn enough, you can predict it, whereas to the average player, to most Minecraft players, unpredictable means unknowable, right? Whereas to a experienced Minecraft player, there is always a way to implement that randomness in it, randomness would always be worse than predictableness, even if it's really hard to work out that predictableness. And then we have the experimental minecart rebalance. This is by far the most loved of all of the experiments. Genuinely, I've yet to hear a single negative thought about this, and part of the reason why is because instead of prescribing what the new minecart should be, they basically said, yeah, minecarts kind of suck right now. They go barely double the speed of walking, and they require so much work to put into them. So what if you, the player, could alter this? And so it's a simple command that lets you set the speed to 8, it's kind of default, or you could set up to 16 and go double as fast. Now we have minecarts that are worth using like console, or if you wanted to, you could go up to 100. And this is where this sort of stuff comes in. It gets very, very silly, especially as you get up higher, because all you need to do to launch this in silly ways is a single redstone circuit, and boom, you can have stuff go flying. This is obviously a lot of fun if you were to combine this with, say, the fun of a minecart TNT, because all you've got to do to launch that crazy distances is use one of these spinners, and it's just oh so fun in my opinion. Everyone loves this. Everyone loves the fact that you can be like, yeah, so I used to believe in rehabilitation, but you know, then I saw what this villager did, and I realized the only correct way to deal with him was that. Why does he go so much further? I love everything about the minecart rebalance, and I love that it ultimately gives players the ability to pick their speed, but it also means that we haven't had the controversies come out because they haven't committed to a speed. Would they pick double the speed, quadruple the speed, 100 times the current speed? Honestly, the answer seems to be unclear, but what is clear is that people love the new changes, but they haven't come to Minecraft yet, despite having universally positive feedback and almost a year to implement them. So that raises the question, if we have so many positive features and only a few negative ones mixed into this pending list of changes, why is it that Minecraft isn't changing? Why are they putting all of this work into specifically changing the game and then not doing so? Looking at the current situation and evidence, I think there are 3 explanations for why Mojang would be doing what they currently are up to. I think the first of these could be quite simply, they are working on changing the game via a major update. This is something that would make a lot of sense because they've worked on so many different game mechanics, changing them entirely and then dropping it, that maybe they have plans to tie these all together some way. The second explanation is that maybe actually they are trying to work out how to get the maximum output from the team, and ultimately adding things is so much easier than changing things, and also results in more things coming to the game. When you change a village, you arguably haven't added any features, but when you add an entirely new type of structure, you've added one new thing, and you didn't have to work out how to jumble around with the existing code. The third explanation is that Mojang are afraid to change Minecraft, something which is a bold claim to make, but I think has some backing when you look at the community response to the updates. But let's go through each of these theories one by one. The first of these is that Minecraft is working on a big update, and I think this is something that they need to do at some point because a 2.0 is inevitable for a game this big. Ultimately, Minecraft could keep going on through the 1.xx updates forever. At the rate of 1 update a year, they wouldn't even make it to 1.80 before a lot of the staff members die or at least stop working on the game, and so you could just indefinitely keep creating new updates going right up the spectrum, but at some point there's going to be an expectation from users, from yourself, and from indeed the corporate overlords that yeah, a 2.0 update has to come out. 1.27 is only so exciting compared to the big 2.0, but how do you make a 2.0 update more exciting than a 1.27? And the answer is you need lots of work. This means you don't just have to add new content, you need to change entire systems in the game to make it refreshing and new to new players, and so maybe Minecraft 2.0 is being worked on. This is one of my personal pet theories that explains why even hugely popular changes like the minecarts or the good bits of the villager trade rebalance or the incredible bits of the combat rebalance haven't been seen in the game yet. However, I also think that it's just as likely that Mojang acknowledges there is a throughput issue at the company. Indeed, if you look at the Caves and Cliffs update, the one that spawned the era of updates that people have mixed feelings towards, this all started because they went so ambitious and then output sort of decreased because of the pandemic, and this led to a big problem because an update that should have been done in 1 year was done in more like 18 months, which meant the next update was behind, which meant the next update was seen as less favorable, and this means that if you are at Mojang and you think that people measure the quality of an update by the number and quality of their features, then it's a much better idea to add than to change. Indeed, if you think about the fundamental mechanics of adding something to the game, you are adding net one feature, whereas changing something is sort of removing something and adding something new at the exact same time. And so a fun hypothetical that I've had for a while and I'd love to discuss somewhere is what should be removed from Minecraft. Indeed, if you want to ask the question of what needs to be changed, you're sort of asking what needs to be thrown away in its entirety and then be replaced. And so to answer that question, what needs to be thrown away in its entirety? And so out of these 3 categories, what would you pick? Which structure should be removed from Minecraft? What mob and what biome? And ultimately, I think unless there's a consensus on which feature really needs to be removed or updated first, that's when we start to have issues about what Mojang should actually change. Whereas no matter what they add to the game, if you don't like it, you simply cannot interact with it. But if they were to remove your favorite feature because it was everyone else's least favorite, they might actively harm your experience while improving the average. And so my example of what mob would I remove is easy, probably the Phantom, but some people might love that they voted in the Phantom. It's literally democratically chosen, and so what is the optics for removing it? Ultimately, I'd say, well, you could improve it and make it a better mechanic and it actually tie in some way that's actually visible to the player, but you would also say for some people, oh no, I like that you don't sleep for 3 days and then the Phantom spawn. I like that it doesn't matter if it's the Never or the End or multiplayer. I like that there is a consequence for not sleeping in my Minecraft world, and those people will be disappointed. The thing that really cued me on to the fact that this is true is I played Minecraft with someone who hadn't played in years, and once we went mining, they were really frustrated because they weren't finding diamonds, and when they learned you had to go deep down, like to -64, they were like, oh no, I want to mine at Y11. That's exactly what I know. That's what I love. I'm going to do it anyway. And they didn't find any diamonds. And I you know, the fact that they were so attached to it, even though they weren't particularly autistic, is something that really drilled into my brain that, like, oh, yeah, some people do just have a fondness for how Minecraft was, and they don't expect to have to relearn the game just because a new update came out. And it made me realize that for some people, updates are a negative. Except, obviously, finding new content, if they run into a pale garden, they'll know it's something new. They don't expect the creaking to behave exactly like the Enderman or the Wither or indeed just a witch or something. They know that it's a new quantity and they can expect to have to deal with it differently, or they can choose not to, but when you play around with an existing feature, you sort of ruin it for them. And so, yeah, if I was to pick one of these three things to remove, I think my personal pick would be the Phantom for mob. Okay, that's definitely an easy one. I think I would pick the Birch Forest next, because the Birch Forest honestly is a great idea when it was first added and there were so few wood types, but now we have so many others, it kind of diminishes the value of birch for me. It's just another type of forest to have to wade through without much real point, in my opinion. I think the birch tree was more special when it was a rare enough tree in the regular forest, and so what is the point in it having its own forest when there's already the pale forest now? Personally, I just think the birch forest does nothing for the game. It could be better if it was removed. And so what about structure? This is actually hard. I don't think there's a single structure I'd be like, wow, Minecraft's better without it. So I would just instead answer with, what is the least valuable structure? And I think the answer is probably the igloo that doesn't have a basement, but if you then say to me, no toy cat, structure in its entirety, you can't pick one bastion variant or one type of village, you've got to pick the entire category, and at that point, it is actually hard, because the answer has to be desert well, but I think the desert well removal would be sad, and because, you know, it's the point of the structure is that it is pointless. It is a beautiful structure of nothingness in a sea of otherwise points to Minecraft, and people who are always talking about adding more pointless mobs to the game say that there is a beauty in things that do nothing, and so the desert well being removed would be the removal of the last do nothing structure. Except that's exactly what they did when they added archaeology to it. Is that a good thing when they improve old structures, or is that removing of Minecraft's heritage? This is the weirder, wider point that we seem to have reached when it comes to real life building, where we say that no, we love things exactly the way they are. How could you dare get rid of this beautiful parking lot that's been there since I was 12? And indeed, it is actually very hard to alter and change buildings in most Western Anglosphere countries, partially for this reason. People are attached to things the way they are, and even if they don't think about the reasons why, they like it a lot. And so ultimately, couldn't you save a lot of work by adding things rather than dealing with the as we've seen with the villager trading debacle? Isn't it much easier to just not deal with it and add new things that people either like or dislike and might even come to like more over time? Indeed, I've been fighting the warden a whole bunch on hardcore, and I realize now, after I'm in a situation where if I die, I lose everything, my world included, just how great the ancient city design is. At the time the ancient city was added, many people said that it was too rare or too easy, or indeed there were too many ways around it, but I think it's really well balanced for a collection of people who are stumbling into it for the first time, and it even has that future changing built into it, because every structure comes with a portal they could decide to change at any point, and even have it pre-built in people's worlds. That is clever foresight, in my opinion. I do think though that perhaps you could better explain the reason that they're adding so many things to the game, not as a, you know, corporate decision to increase throughput, but instead because Mojang are afraid to change Minecraft. This seems to be a very recent change, but there is a lot of evidence to back it up. There are lots of things that are being added to the game now, and very few changes being made to existing features. Obviously, a natural balance in Minecraft should be that some number of features have to change at all times to match the ones being added, because if you don't do that, the number of features that are slowly aging massively increases. This is what is currently happening with Minecraft right now, in my opinion, and we're seeing it with all the features that they didn't come round to, such such as the end, such as the biomes that are left untouched, and such as basically anything that has come from these experiments, there are many parts of Minecraft that are aging and not necessarily for the better. This is something which they should be dealing with, but what if they're afraid to make major changes? This is something that happens to basically every major entertainment property, because ultimately, as the game is aging, not only is its player base becoming more conservative and wanting the same thing they had way back. I mean, just look at the golden age of Minecraft for proof that some people think that Minecraft went too far when they added sprinting, of all things. So adding things to the game can always lead to that fracturing in player base, which isn't good for sales or the morale of the team, but also now Minecraft is largely created by people who are different to the team who originally made those things way back. In the last wave of massive changes, starting with the update aquatic and ending with the combat update, snapshots, we could see that Jeb was largely the architect of these changes, and as he'd been around since the beginning as the basic first non-Minecraft, non-notch employee at Minecraft who led the game, as we have Jeb there, he finds it very easy to make sweeping changes and say, yeah, the oceans suck, let's make them better. Oh yeah, this structure sucks, let's improve it. However, if Jeb has taken a step back, and it seems at least publicly he has, it is no longer Jeb or Lydia who do announcements for the game, but instead largely it seems to be Vu Bui or Lady Agnes. Although Jeb is still working at the company and does make appearances, it does seem as though he is not the person taking the main focus for the game, and the same is true for Dinnerbone, the other very public developer who we know so much of the game from. He has been injured and so largely not working on the vanilla game, which gives Minecraft a big problem that many entertainment properties face, because as a series gets old enough, it starts to get to the point where the original influences that drove it cannot be there anymore. Without the original people who worked on, say, Star Wars, you create movies that are not themed based on the weird samurais or space operas they're going for, but instead they're trying to make Star Wars movies and they're building lore that feels like it fits into Star Wars first and working out how it fits later. The same is true for The Simpsons. If you've watched any modern episodes, instead of trying to build a brand new episode to make one of those all-time greats, they're watching the first 10 seasons and applying that onto modern day issues. They're not that terrible, it's a watchable show, but it doesn't have that same cult status because it's not building from the same place. This is a problem that will affect Minecraft, and it is a problem that will be very hard to overcome because at some point you'll have people who are working on the game because they like the game. This is actually a great place to hire from. It's much better than hiring people who have no idea about Minecraft and have to learn the entire thing from scratch, although there are some proofs that that's not always true. But it is worth mentioning that we do have some proof that Jeb did take a step back from the combat snapshot, because although he said he was working on phase 2, the last thing we ever heard about it was that Olref had actually been one of the people who had picked up work on the combat snapshots. He had spoken with Jeb about it, and indeed, hopefully Jeb is involved to some extent, but that might be something that happened. The game, the update got picked up and then it got lost in this whole new wave of not necessarily making changes, or all of that is just the public-facing persona and they are working on a grand 2.0 style update with huge revamps to combat, with huge revamps to minecarts, huge revamps to villages. But regardless of what the outcome is, I think there is still an interesting question, which is, can the community palate it? After all of these years with the combat systems that the two games have relatively had, can you ever have a world where you bring Java and Bedrock combat together? Can you ever take them further? And can you change certain mechanics, or are people so drilled into the worlds and the farms they have now that if you break them, they won't bother learning about the new system? They'll just say, well, this sucks, and stop playing Minecraft, or leave an angry review or tweet somewhere instead. That is the interesting question that sadly we don't have an answer to. But yeah, to conclude, Minecraft has kept adding things instead of changing, and personally I think that that should change. Although the developers could just be busy working in the background, the community is kind of in the dark about all of it. This is why we need a roadmap outlining the developers' goals and plans. This is something which makes sense, and why the Future of Minecraft post, which sounded so negative, was so well received, was because it sounded like we would always be aware of what Mojang is working on for the next update or two ahead of time. Sure, this would be done by shortening the update spans and by making the updates slightly shorter, but it meant that we never have this big phase of time where who knows what Mojang is up to. However, there is also a problem that if they outline their expectations too clearly, such as say telling us what the 3 drops from now would be, and then they change their mind, that these false expectations would be very disappointing. There are lots of things in Minecraft which need to be cancelled for good reason, and personally the Fireflies are the best example to me. People like the Fireflies because ambience, but the actual benefit of the Fireflies is ambience, and the downsides are, well, lag, poor game design, some stupid imbecile children think that if they see something in Minecraft, then it has But other than that, I think you can see the big problem of a roadmap being made public, and that is the expectations that it can create. We had a big discussion about how promises have really affected Mojang's thinking over the years, and so they're being very cautious about over-promising or under-delivering on basically anything, which is why we get something which feels close to a mystery. I think letting us know about the drops ahead of time is important, but I also think that it's important those drops actually take steps to change and improve major parts of the game. Even if they are looking at all of the updates we mentioned in this video and dropping or scrapping them all, why not make the change so that mending appears slightly more often in jungle temples? Why not have these very slight tweaks that make people want to enjoy the existing structures more? I've said forever that you could take the existing jungle temple and create 2 or 3 alternate trap variants, and just that alone would give so much more fun to anyone going into one. And indeed, the same is true for desert temples. That TNT trap hasn't fooled anyone in a long time, but what if there was an alternate version that might? There's so much fun that could be unlocked if Mojang were cognizant of their existing features and took good care of them rather than leaving them to rot, because there is a lot of really good potential inside of Minecraft, and we've just got to wait until they decide against their current plan, which is changing not. Anyway, with that said, I hope you enjoyed this video. Please do like it and or subscribe, whatever you do to YouTube videos you care about. And if you want to learn more about Mojang employees who left and the various promises they made before they did so, please do check out one of the videos. They'll be linked down below. I've been making a few video essays on the channel about Minecraft recently, and I hope to make some more if you continue to support them. Anyway, thank you for watching, and goodbye.